Josh, let's talk about. Yeah, actually, this is one of the most beautiful scores I've ever seen. Joshua Musikantow, everybody.
Yay!
Woo!
So yeah, let's. There we go. So this is cApprIcio by Joshua Musikantow with AI assistance.
Yes.
Assistance. So we're already going to be getting into the mucky muck with the AI.
You know, Ben was saying he wanted to write an electronic piece with no speakers, and I actually did as well, and it probably uses even more electricity.
The carbon footprint of this.
Yeah, don't get me started.
Yeah, that's all right.
I do feel bad about that.
This is the I'm not big on like playing off an iPad, but this one, I mean, like that would be terrible to print. Just be like heavy with it. Let's show everybody what this looks like off the bat if you haven't already. I mean, just looking right away at page 5. Yeah. Okay. Here's the question I'm going to ask. What's up with that?
Well, you know,
and I was going to ask you the same thing. I can't wait for this.
About 15 months ago, like I got super into AI art.
I think I remember that. Yeah.
And like I was really intrigued by like the possibility of doing a graphic score with, you know, like text-to-image generators. You know, like they weren't. I mean, no one like who made these things like had that in mind. Oh, well, this is what you are supposed to do with these things, you know. So yeah, I spent quite a long, you know, just as much time as I would on any piece doing this. You know, I usually spend about 6 months or so on a piece. So I like made like thousands of these pages, like maybe tens of thousands. I mean, you know, you can generate so much. Experimenting with, you know, different and you know, like having to think like, well, how am I going to explain what I want to see to the AI, you know, and you know, like trying different terms like, you know, wireframe diagram or stipple, or I even tried like, you know, IKEA assembly instruction, like weird things, because it's like, you know, it doesn't necessarily, I mean, like things that it would know what they were, but then like kind of play with the weights and negative weights, positive weights, and just kind of like tune it and tweak it and like make all these different versions. And like I had so many of these things, so then I had to, I mean, I kind of pared it down, but also not that much, because it's like it's like an information overload.
Yeah.
So, you know, they were at, you know, like we were talking, like how much did the AI control this versus me? I think the main thing it did control was just the sheer like amount of information, and that kind of set the pace of the piece. Like I do feel like I was able to impart like the aesthetics that I wanted on it, but without the AI, like I wouldn't have been able to produce that amount of information like in that amount of time.
And did you have sounds like in mind as you were putting in these inputs?
Well, what I had like categories like in mind, and like I had a kind of like a formal plan. I think I had like 8 different like categories, and I had like a vertex diagram of a cube, and so like they each corresponded to a different point. And I was basically just making like Hamiltonian cycles around it. And I didn't explain this in the score because I don't know that it was something like the performers needed to know.
What is that?
Well, it's basically like you can go to any, you know, any 2 corners that are connected. Like you can go from there to there, and the idea is like, can you get around to all of the corners without passing over the same one twice.
Oh, I played those games.
Yeah,
before.
it's like a
okay.
game,
I know
and
what it is.
you know, and
I
so
feel
like
smart now.
each of the movements is like another cycle through it.
Mhm.
Now I don't know how much that comes across necessarily. I mean, but for me it was like a useful, because there was just so much material and I needed a way to organize it, and that was helpful to me. But you know, I don't know that the AI alone, though, of course, is the only interesting thing about this piece, because then we also have to talk about the fact that they're performing actions on each other's instruments. So in a way, it's like I'm like this composer who's been like upskilled with this AI. So now they're like a super performer, in in a lot of part of the piece, because like you have two bows, four hands, playing one instrument for 2/3 of this piece.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's cool.
So in a way too, it's kind of like they're wrestling for control as I'm wrestling for control, with the AI, and like that's what we're talking about, like is who's in control, So it's kind of dramatized that way.
So talk about maybe some of your impressions of this. There's so much to go through. I don't know if we can maybe scroll through a couple more pages.
Yeah.
Just scroll and let it land where it lands. Every single page is just incredibly complex and beautiful. But that has some semblance. I'm on page 14, I think. Yeah, 14.
Yeah.
There's some semblance of music there, and then these 3D orbs. What was your reaction to receiving this score?
Well, we work with graphic scores frequently, and I think usually when we get one, we're like, okay, let's dive into this. Let's figure out what the language is of this score. And this piece, we got it, and we're like, there's not one language. We can't. There's so much that it wasn't you're deeply in something. And so it did feel like this information overload, the sheer density of the images, and that they keep coming at you every page, and we have to spend approximately 30 seconds.
Because the
more
piece
or less,
is 10
the piece
to
is
12
10 to 12
minutes.
minutes.
So we have 40 pages.
And so,
pages,
so we really had to go. So when we're doing this, we have to kind of zoom in or zoom out on a page and pick one thing that's really speaking to us then, or zoom out and be like, what's the vibe of this page, you know? So we would have these discussions and be like, what does this feel like? And we come up with one or two words, and we'd be like, okay, that's what we're doing here. So we can come here and we can be inspired by these words that we've been inspired by the picture of, and so we kind of had to move through this piece in that fashion, just because there was so much information.
Right.
I think also the experience of playing on each other's instruments has been
it's interesting. It's not something that it's not something that we've been asked to do actually really ever.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of like those AI portraits where it's they do those portrait photos of people, and maybe one of them is good, and then the rest of them they have hands coming out of them. So I have to be the extra hand and bow coming off of Hannah's instrument, and she is doing that on mine. And so how we're maneuvering around the instrument, it's very, at first it felt very invasive for me to walk that close to Hannah.
I'm touching my instrument,
It's
Come on, Hector. One of us is really close. Other.
I have to come over. It's an interesting thing, because I don't know, the way that I touch my instrument, the way that I feel about my instrument, I'm very close to it, but I also know it really well, so it's I'm not super worried that I'm gonna hurt it or anything, but you don't want to hurt someone else's instrument. You also want to make sure that it's okay with them, because you're touching your fingerboard. It's you gotta have consent about
instruments,
and so I think that was just a learning curve. Also, at first it kind of felt like one of my hands was redundant. I'm just what am I even doing with this hand? The one that I was trying to play on her viola.
It's interesting to figure out the different things we can do with the four hands.
Yeah. So we can split things different ways, but also I think depending on where it almost feels we turn it into two parts of the instrument, so we can each play. But
That's cool.
And I think that another thing about the score that's been different about the way that we have interacted with graphic scores in the past is that it is really, like we were having this conversation about who's in control, and someone with this constant volume, we felt like we were being like controlled by the score. And so rather than like a graphic score where we might be like interacting more, especially in the movement when we're on our own instruments, it's like, you're doing this and I'm doing this and we have nothing to do with each other, and then we move on to this, and like, so it's kind of this like constant creation of material, kind of like the AI, just like shooting things out. That maybe is not in conversation with anything, or like
and not in conversation with each other.
Not in conversation with each other, kind of like missing like a greater, like, you know, societal, you know, coming together. But it is just like this constant like noise, sonic.
That's, I mean, creation. I think that there's so much resonance in that. Like in general in the world. You know, I mean, we're all talking about AI and everything. You know, you mentioned like that the score and the playing of it like matches like the struggle of like trying to control the thing. But then, I mean, this like constant barrage, you know, and like where you're just trying, like, I don't know, so many days I feel like I'm just like trying to like maintain control of like my world here while the rest of the world is spitting input after input after input after input at me and everything.
Well, that's what Josh did to us.
There you go. So, I rate this very looking forward to your piece. Any other thoughts? As we'll talk to our Phantom composer next. Phantom. Yeah, of course. Thank you, Josh.